Before the film starts, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Emma, I'm 38, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at the age of 3. Up until a few years ago, I kept my Crohn's disease a secret, or at least I kept the impact it had on me and those around me a secret. I had no problem telling people I had Crohn's, but I always followed it with, "But I'm fine, it's nothing to worry about." And then all that changed when I had to have an NG tube fitted. Suddenly, I was wearing my illness on my face, and the whole world could see that quite clearly, I wasn't fine. It got me thinking, and I realised what a stigma there is around inflammatory bowel disease, and I realised just what an elephant in the room my Crohn's disease is. Nobody wants to talk about it, and I figure it's time that changed. So that's when I decided to make this film. And the film you're about to see is just a short. It's a snapshot of the much bigger message that we really want to get out there. We want to encourage people to believe that it's okay not to be okay. We want people to be okay with talking about not being okay. So that's why we're jumping on the It Takes Guts campaign. Because living with inflammatory bowel disease takes guts. Talking about living with inflammatory bowel disease, well, that takes even more guts. So to everyone who's helped us make this short, thank you. We are hugely grateful. And to anyone who wants to jump on board and help us to make the bigger picture, then please do get in touch. There'll be details at the end of the film. And this is Nelly, the elephant in the room. When I first found out that I had to have an NG tube fitted, I was terrified. I was terrified that people were going to see me differently. I was terrified that it would be all people would see. And the tube very quickly developed its own identity. When it first went in, I was very aware of walking into a room and knowing that people could see it, but knowing how scared people were of bringing it up. So it became the elephant in the room, which meant my illness became the elephant in the room. I am Emma Gordon. I am 37. Hanging on to that for a couple more months. We're here because when I was 3, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease.
Well, Emma was a delightful little baby, as any mum will tell you about babies. And she developed an allergy. The first time you're supposed to introduce your baby to egg, she had a very violent reaction and went into anaphylactic shock.
And I had lots of allergies that I was diagnosed with, that we first discovered when I was about 8 months old. And obviously diet is quite closely linked with Crohn's disease.
So inflammatory bowel diseases are chronic conditions of the bowel that cause inflammation and affect patients that way. In the UK, there's about 300,000 patients suffering from inflammatory bowel diseases. The two main forms are ulcerative colitis, which only affects the large bowel, or Crohn's disease, which can affect the bowel anywhere.
So when Emma was, she was probably just about 3, she did develop very bad eczema. And the thing that made it more worrying was that it was very, very visible round her mouth. She might just have had, say, a glass of milk or something like that, and then her face would immediately, the corners of her mouth would crack. And I started getting more concerned that perhaps there was some connection between what she was eating or drinking and the eczema.
I used to have a lot of eczema. I had really bad eczema, particularly around my mouth, but all over. I used to have, I kind of had a constantly sore bottom that obviously is symptomatic.
So Crohn's disease can virtually appear at any age. And we've seen a dramatic increase in kids and teenagers being diagnosed with Crohn's disease in the last 20 years. It's still relatively uncommon for a child below the age of 8 or 9 to be diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but we do see it more common. We see it occasionally in kids as young as 3 or 4.
It affects my diet massively, and I've spent most of my life on a dairy-free diet, I've had lots of food allergies, and I still have a very restrictive diet, and it's affected my weight. That's a fairly obvious one. A lot over the years. I've spent a lot of time underweight.
We do know that, for example, the bacteria in the bowel, the microbiome, are strongly influenced by your type of diet. And if you have a certain diet of a habit, or for religious purposes, or for your beliefs, like a vegan diet, you will have a different bowel microbiome than somebody, for example, who eats meat, or somebody who restricts gluten, and so on. So we do know that this leads to different microbiome, and that may influence how Crohn's disease behaves. However, a lot of that is still unknown.
When I was 10, I went on to steroids, which was the only treatment really at the time. Every time we tried to take me off them, the symptoms came back really badly. I can remember being rushed into mum and dad having to rush me down to A&E really late, so many nights. There's lots of photos that I look at from particularly the first time I was on steroids between 10 and 13, where the effect of steroids then was, I think, far worse than it is now in terms of puffing people up. So I look at those photos and I've just got this, I think I look like someone's plugged an air pump into me and just gone and pumped me up. And I hate all pictures from that period because that's kind of all I see.
I think one of the horrible things for Emma was because of what happened when she was 11 and went on steroids. After that, she just had a fear of that word steroids, and whenever she had a flare-up, and it coincided with her seeing the consultant, because she had to go to see the consultant every 3 months just to keep a check on things. And the notion when occasionally one might say, oh, I think maybe a short, sharp burst of steroids, she would absolutely, no, I'm not doing that, no, not going, had a real horror of just the word even, because she found it so awful.
So steroids can be really good, and when we need to treat patients for a flare, they give us a relatively quick treatment that works for the patient and gets them better at a great price, as I said. So the key is to use steroids as and when needed, but not have patients end up on steroids in long periods of time, because they stop working as well and they come with lots of side effects. Unfortunately, there's no treatment for Crohn's disease that fixes every problem at no risk.
So currently I'm taking 10 tablets a morning just as management and maintenance. That includes 7 different types of medication. Steroids, a lot. I've obviously got steroids in there for emergency use. You don't self-medicate with steroids, but they are there. I also have anti-diarrhea tablets to combat constipation, each end of the spectrum. Staple for a bowel disease sufferer, I've got an EpiPen for if I have a severe allergic reaction. I have, over the years, been on anti-TNF drugs that I've had to self-inject. I've managed to keep my weight just the right side of 39 or 40 kilos for a while now. If my weight were to drop back below that, if it were to drop back to 39, I would start watching more closely. And if it were to drop below 39, I'd have to get back in touch with my dietitian and my consultant, because they would probably want to, with immediate effect, put a tube back in. When just before my tube went in, my weight was the lowest I think it's ever been. It was 34.1 kilos, and which is what I think a 10-year-old girl is supposed to weigh. So that was my lowest weight, and obviously I would do everything I could not to let it get anywhere near that again. So my Crohn's has mainly affected the point where my large intestine and small intestine meet, which was the part that I actually had removed in my first surgery when I was 18.
When she got to 18, after she had had quite a lot of serious flare-ups, it was then that the consultant said, I think maybe the time's come when you're going to need something removing. And obviously that was very hard for her to take, especially because that was coinciding with her just going to start at Manchester University, where she was going to do a drama degree.
I've had 3 surgeries, And the surgeries that I've had, the first one was a bowel resection, which is one of the common surgeries. Surgery has changed a lot now. There's a lot more, I think, that they can do a lot less invasively. When I had my bowel resection, which is basically where they made an incision, which was far bigger than it was meant to be, from all the way up here right down to here, and they took out the most diseased part of my intestine and then joined the rest up.
As far as her doing things that she's wanted to do, she's never let it stop her, and probably one of the hardest things was when she was teaching drama at Leeds Girls High School, and she became very, very ill and had to go in to have more surgery. She said, but I can't because the production is, in 2 weeks or whenever, and she didn't have a choice. She had to. She was so ill, absolutely devastatingly ill.
So surgery might often be required in patients with Crohn's disease when medical treatments fail, or when a complication has occurred, like an abscess or a narrowing that you simply cannot treat with medicines. So what type of surgery is required entirely depends where the Crohn's disease is affecting the patient. Most commonly, patients will have it in the terminal ileum, which is the last part of a small bowel, and in that case, more often than not, the surgery would be to remove that part and the top part of the large bowel, and most of that surgery can be done keyhole, and patients get their bowels joined up at the time. That's when everything goes well. However, in cases of emergencies or when patients are severely unwell, very often they end up with a surgery that gives them a stoma.
The way that I feel about the perception of various things like the NG tube, like the bag, is linked a lot to my own preconceptions and my own prejudgment of myself, and I suppose it takes a long time to change ingrained ways of thinking, and I did go through my whole life up until the age of 35 telling people I've got Crohn's disease but I'm fine, and I spent so long and worked so hard at perpetuating that image of me as fine, as the life and soul of the party, as the sunshine in the room, I wasn't even conscious of doing it, but I was always overcompensating because I didn't want people to see me as disabled or ill or limited in some way. So I made a point of doing more. But again, it really is only in recent years that I've actually acknowledged and realised that that's what I was doing.
It makes me and John both feel blessed that we have such a courageous daughter who now is an ambassador, really, because she's opened up about what life is like living with a very serious condition, and her idea of making this film is basically to help other people come to terms with it, so you don't feel isolated and so you don't feel you have to keep it as a secret.
So our understanding of Crohn's disease has changed a bit over the last 30 years. What's changed more is the treatment options. We still don't know what exactly causes Crohn's disease. We know that genetics plays a role, but we only find that in 1/3 of our patients the most common genetic defect is found. We're a long way away from fully understanding it, and if we ever get a cure, we're still a million miles away from that.
I'm about to remove Nelly after exactly 16 months and 2 days. Nelly is coming out. I've been instructed to lean forward and pull hard. Let me roll my sleeves up. I'll feed us in, Nelly. Oh! I've got no tube! My face is back. You've got two sides of her face. I always said when I was younger that one day I would want to try and make a difference for people living with Crohn's disease, and one day I would want to try and help other people who were going through some of the things I've gone through. There's no shying away from it. It's rubbish, or can be rubbish at times, living with chronic illness. But if I can use that to actually help make it easier for the next 3-year-old who's diagnosed and who grows up keeping it a secret for whatever reason, to face that secret and to be more open about it, then there'll be something positive from it.